And good morning, Michigan. Rich Kincaid in on this Monday for Michael Patrick Shields. I'll be here all week, as a matter of fact, as Michael vacations. I'll take you right into Thanksgiving Day. And normally we'd go right to Gary Austin, talk about a few news headlines. And indeed, we will be chatting about the news, the latest in current events, some developments in North Korea, for example, regarding the potentiality of them developing nuclear weapons. There's saber rattling going on in that part of the world again. We'll talk about the future of the Michigan Film Tax Credit. A lot going on there and a lot to talk about. And as I say, we will do that. We've been talking sports to this point, and we just need to dot a couple I's and cross a couple of T's. We talked about Michigan State and their remarkable comeback victory on Saturday over Purdue. The Red Wings staged a remarkable comeback last night to knock off Calgary in overtime 5-4. Wings were down 4-2 in the third period. Henrik Zetterberg made it 4-3 with about 9 minutes to go. And then with 3.2 seconds left on the clock, Pavel Datsyuk made an unbelievable play as he brought the puck into the zone, beat not one, not two, but three Flames. And Henrik, since three Flames had gone to Datsyuk, was wide open out in front of the net, took the pass from Datsyuk, and Zetterberg, with 3.2 seconds to go, his second goal of the period, seventh of the season, to tie the game 4-4. And then in overtime at the 1:38 mark, Nicholas Lidstrom walking in to score on a backhand, and the Wings win it in overtime over Calgary 5-4 last night. The Lions, you got to talk about those guys. You do. They lost again. That's 26 straight road losses for Detroit, and that is, as you know, a National Football League record as the Lions went to Dallas, outplayed the Cowboys in the first half. Hey, they had out-statisticked them in terms of first downs and overall total yards in the first half of that football game, and actually led the thing 10-7 when Dallas was guilty of holding in the end zone. They were assessed a safety, so the Lions had themselves a 12-7 third quarter lead, and you're thinking, are you serious? Well, no, we weren't really, because once again, a Lion blunder came to the fore. In this case, it was a muffed punt. The Lions were trying to down a punt near the Dallas goal line, and the Lion player put his hand on it to stop it, and it bounced as perfectly as can be to Brian McCann of the Dallas Cowboys. He returned 97 yards for the touchdown. And if you're watching on the TV side, you see him going in right there, and you see a replay of this play. It looked like a basketball pass when the Lions were simply trying to pin Dallas deep in their own territory, and that really turned the game around. After that, it was a case of former Lions quarterback Jon Kitna taking over as he both threw for touchdowns and ran for touchdowns. As a matter of fact, he had a 29-yard touchdown run. Lions tried to stay in this one with a touchdown in the third quarter to keep things close. But then, as we say, it was a Kitna taking over as he began throwing touchdown passes. And then he scored on a naked bootleg. And this turned out to be the longest scoring run by a Dallas quarterback ever. It was the longest run of Kitna's 14-year career, a 29-yard touchdown for Kitna to wrap up the scoring, and the Lions lose 35-19, and they get to play a real easy team. Coming up on Thanksgiving Day, the New England Patriots come to town. They're not very good. So a short turnaround, as is always the case for the Lions. They'll take on New England at Ford Field on Thursday. This is November the 22nd. This is a momentous day in American history. There are people who are of a certain age, and I am of a certain age. I am of that certain age, who remember exactly where they were when this particular incident occurred. I mean, I remember distinctly being in my third grade classroom. This was one of those events in American history that you just don't forget. 47 years ago today, something happened in American history that no one will ever forget, should ever forget, and Gary Austin will take a look back.
On this date in history, November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy was shot in Dallas. Now a look back with the one-time head of the MSU Voice Library, Dr. Maurice Crane. So if you turned on your radio on that fateful day, you would have heard this.
This flash from Dallas. Two priests who were with President Kennedy say that he is dead of bullet wounds.
Here it is. Flash, Washington. Government sources here in the Capitol say President Kennedy is dead.
Dr. Maurice Crane, do you remember where you were when JFK was gunned down in Dallas? Oh, I think everybody of my generation remembers where he was. I was sitting in my office. I was an associate professor at Michigan State in the Humanities Department. I was in Wilson Hall, and John Reinhold, who was 3 doors down, came running into my office. He had just been called by his wife, and we turned on the radio, and we heard the very first reports. And they, of course, were very sketchy because they didn't have information.
Bulletin, Dallas. 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy motorcade today in downtown Dallas.
When Kennedy was shot, 95% of all people knew about it within 45 minutes. It's due to this great explosion we have of information, and it's due really to radio, and luckily it's all been saved on tape.
And the impact was felt nationwide. For example, in New York on Wall Street.
The bulletin just in, the New York Stock Exchange has closed operations today.
It was a time of national shock, but more than the shock nationally, more than Wall Street, more than the canceling of athletic events, was the personal feeling that each individual had. Everybody took it personally. But Dwight Eisenhower, a very sage man, and the president who had preceded Kennedy in the White House, said, "We are not going to panic. We're going to be just fine." He said, "We're sorry and we share Mrs. Kennedy's grief, but as a nation, we are strong people."
I share the sense of shock and dismay that the entire nation must feel at the despicable act that took the life of the nation's president.
Then former President Dwight Eisenhower, out of office just a couple of years, reacting to the assassination of JFK. Adlai Stevenson ran against Eisenhower in '52 and again in '56. The Illinois Democrat also, Dr. Maurice Crane, quick to react to the Kennedy assassination.
Yes, he was visibly moved. He was shocked. He did not know what to do, but he suggested that all of us look to prayer for our solace and for our guidance.
The tragedy of this day is beyond instant comprehension. All of us who knew him will bear the grief of his death to the day of ours.
Then Vice President Lyndon Johnson was traveling with the Kennedys in Dallas, and moments after the confirmed death of JFK, LBJ was sworn into office. In fact, he was president by the time he got back to Washington.
Yes, the system is such that it just continued. It went on.
After all these years, people still ask the question, was it Lee Harvey Oswald who shot JFK?
Oh, I think there are people who are satisfied with what they hear and people who are not satisfied. I think you can divide the world into those who like closure. The Warren Commission put closure on it. It's over, it's done, let's get on with it. Half of the people you know want closure, and half of the people you know say there's more to this than meets the eye. And they're both right. They're both right. There's more to anything than meets the eye. And there also is a necessity not to chew on old wounds, but to keep going on with your life, going on with our lives, as in fact we have had to.
That was a part of a radio interview I did with the one-time director of the MSU Voice Library, Dr. Maurice Crane. It first aired in Michigan in November 1993. I'm Gary Austin.
For that report on what it remains to this day a very sad day. You wonder about the course of American history. Had John F. Kennedy lived, would we, for example, have gotten involved in Vietnam to the extent that we in fact did? I mean, that's the number one question I think that that is raised in my mind. And of course, even to this day, as you pointed out in that piece, I think a majority of Americans believe that Lee Harvey Oswald did not, in fact, act alone in killing JFK.
Well, there are a wide range of theories, as we know, and it seems like every time a few years go by, we have yet another one. But yeah, that's a good point, Rich. We often wonder what kind of a senior statesman JFK would have been if he had lived. And boy, it's just hard to imagine all those years have passed. That interview I did was a portion of a longer formatted interview with Dr. Maurice Crane, the one-time head of the MSU Voice Library. That was back in 1993. And listening back to the audio, and that's the marvel of radio and the mass media, Rich, because saving all of those audio clips. The MSU Voice Library has over 50,000 voices, famous people through the decades, all contained on tape, saved for the ages. It really is amazing.
All right. Gary, thanks very much for the piece. We appreciate the remembrance, even though the subject matter saddens us. Gary Austin in the newsroom this morning. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick, and we're going to be joined by Ken Dallafor. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about yesterday's latest Lions disaster. This is MPS in the Morning. Well, a heavy emphasis this morning on the sports, and we will segue into the food and the travel, as this is, of course, Thanksgiving week, and that means we get the opportunity to have our hearts broken not once but twice by the Lions in the same calendar week. It only comes around once a year. That makes it very special indeed. And Ken Dallafor, the former Lion, is on the other end of our line this morning. And boy, Ken, they did it again yesterday. I thought that the entire Lions season could be crystallized into one play yesterday. And I'm not talking about that funky punt that got returned 97 yards. I'm talking about the first play that Dallas ran from scrimmage. The Lions had the ball first in the game yesterday, couldn't move it, couldn't sustain a drive, punted it away, and had Dallas pinned back on their own 2-yard line. You got them where you want them. What do the Lions do on the first play? They jump offside. So 1st and 10 at the 2 for Dallas is now 1st down and 8. Dallas goes on to drive 98 yards for a touchdown, but it just drives you nuts. You got them pinned back there, and you make a mistake like that. It's just inexcusable, and I think it sort of set the tone the way things turned out yesterday.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rich. It's just one of those things that they keep having annoying penalties. I mean, in reverse, you see them on the 2-yard line when they pinned them down there and they get a safety. That's a wonderful thing, But, yeah, in return. And then the penalties at bad times, taking away big plays, meaningful plays for, big gains. And it's becoming very painful to watch the repeat offenders that are on the Lions team right now.
It was hard not to be optimistic when early in the third quarter after the safety to which you just alluded, the Lions had a 12-7 lead at Dallas. And you're thinking maybe, just maybe, but I just know from my own experience, as soon as I have that thought, something bad happens. And in this case, it was Brian McCann going 97 yards. On a fluke. It really was a fluke. The Lions were trying to down the ball, pin Dallas back by their goal line again, and that ball just took, you'd call it a funny hop, but it just took a perfect hop to McCann. And I think the Lions, thinking the ball was down, just had given up on the play, and boom, he goes the other way for a score.
Yeah, it was really a heads-up play on their part. As soon as the kick team touches the ball, then the turnover cannot be had. So you just take it and run with it and see what happens. So it was really a heads-up play, and unfortunately it turns out to be 6 the other way, and on the review it looks like he stepped out on the 20 to boot, so it's insult to injury to the Lions again.
Indeed, and it reminded longtime veteran Lions watchers of a play Lem Barney made. Probably back in the early 1970s, where he had a situation where a punt was rolling to a stop and everybody had sort of given up, and Lem was heady enough just to pick the ball up. As you say, once it's been touched, there can't be a turnover, and he just picked the thing up, and much as McCann did yesterday, raced down the sidelines for a touchdown. So it's been done before, but I think the thing that surprised me is that at that level, you'd have professional football players who would not be aware of the situation and would fall asleep like that, permit something like that to happen.
Well, I think, the Lions were aggressively trying to down the ball, and, all attention and focus was on that. But nonetheless, you're right, you have to be heads up. I shouldn't say we, but back when I was playing special teams, you always knew the rules about the kick team touching the ball, and it's emphasized every week, and it's embedded in their head. And it's just one of many plays. You're still in the game after that, and then you turn the ball over, and it just results are the same week in and week out when you're going to be repeat offenders on penalties, turnovers, and just the whole thing, those comedy of errors, if you will.
I think, Ken Dallafor, it's okay for you to say we when you reference the Lions. You played for them after all. It's hard to be more legit than that.
Well, sometimes I don't want to be part of that we. This morning would be one of those, Rich.
Sure.
So,
you go back. Go ahead,
Go
Ken.
ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you go back a couple of weeks to the Jets game where the Lions seemingly had the ball game won with a 20-10 lead with under 5 minutes to go. And if they win that game, Jets have got, after their remarkable come-from-behind victory yesterday, I believe they have the best record in the NFL at 8-2. Had the Lions beaten them, that would have been a lot of people think, a springboard because they had two what looked at the time to be easy games coming up at Buffalo, which at the time was winless, and then at Dallas, which at the time was really struggling. This was before they fired their coach, Wade Phillips, and went on their current two-game win streak. And had that scenario, in fact, taken place, had the Lions beaten the Jets, gotten that lift, won the next two, everybody'd be really excited about this football team because you'd be talking about a 5-5 team going into Thanksgiving Day, and the Lions, as you know, have had a history of pulling upsets on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, there's a lot of would-have, should-have, could-haves in there, Rich.
That's all it is, yeah.
Yeah, and if we had Matthew Stafford healthy and we had Javid Best at his best, he's running on two bad toes, and you look at all those things. I thought at times defense really played well yesterday, and that was encouraging. And you see some encouraging things at certain points, and then yesterday we have running back by committee. They're just trying to fit people in there and situations to get by. So there's a lot of things working against the Lions, but it does for every other team too. It's just part of the NFL season. You have injuries, but a lot of would have, should have, could have to come in 5-5. They're not. They're 2-8, and they just are still trying to find a way to turn the corner.
Well, a lot of interesting storylines in the National Football League yesterday. Green Bay blew out Minnesota 31-3. The Vikings are 3-7. There's a lot of speculation that Brad Childress could lose his job as early as later today.
Yeah, that wheels have come off the Viking bandwagon up there, and I think leadership's in question, and I would be surprised if Childress made it through this week, or definitely if he made it through this season. He's lost control of the players in the locker room, it appears.
Indeed, we talked about the Jets a moment ago with their big come-from-behind victory over the Lions 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, they go to Cleveland and win on the road in overtime as well. First NFL team ever to win back-to-back road overtime games. And then yesterday, they certainly looked to be dead. They had blown a 23-7 lead in the fourth quarter against the Houston Texans, got the ball back trailing with 40 seconds to go and no timeouts. And Mark Sanchez, who I wish the Lions had drafted instead of Mark Stafford, and I've said that publicly, I'm not jumping on a bandwagon late here, he hits Braylon Edwards with a bomb to get him into a first-and-goal situation, and then hits Santonio Holmes with a game-winning touchdown with 10 seconds to go. And that's why the Jets have the best record in the NFL. They're this year's version of the Cardiac Kids.
That they are, it appears, but it's hard to think you're going to win out that way, but they find a way to win, and they're playing. They're a good team. They have a good, solid defense, and they have an offense that produces when they need it. And so it's got to be pretty exciting for the New York Jet fans, and they keep winning. So that's what the heck.
Exactly. And it was quite a day for the Manning brothers yesterday, but not in a good way. Peyton for Indianapolis, trying to lead his team to a come-from-behind victory at New England, throws a key interception that ended Indy's hopes of coming back in that football game. They were in field goal range, trailing by 3. They decided to go for the touchdown before attempting the field goal, which is fair enough, but he throws an interception. That ends Indianapolis' hopes. And then the Giants, I thought a pretty good football game last night at Philadelphia. Philly had a big lead, 16-3, I believe, at one point. The Giants came back, took a 17-16 lead. Philadelphia, Michael Vick playing so well, comes back, scores a touchdown. They lead. Now Eli Manning is driving the Giants back, deep into Philadelphia territory, and he did a funny thing. He ran for a first down, but instead of sliding, which would have meant the play was immediately dead, he dove forward, and then when he hit the ground, he lost the football. It was a fumble. Philadelphia recovered, and the ball game was over. So you had two huge turnovers by the Manning brothers to cost their teams potential victories yesterday. You certainly don't see that every Sunday.
No, you sure don't. I know in the case of Peyton Manning, he's trying to make something happen. It was going to be a long field goal if it wasn't a turnover there, and it was third down, and he was trying to convert it. And his right side got bumped in the throw and threw him off the angle a little bit, but you don't usually see that by Peyton Manning or Eli Manning in the sense of the fumble. It turned out to be a bad day for the Manning family. So, but give credit to the Eagles. They played well in that game, and then New England hung on to win, and they're on a big roll right now after a number of weeks ago when Tom Brady got everybody fired up on the sideline and really injected his passion into the game. So hopefully they used it all up yesterday, and when they come to Ford Field on Thursday, maybe the Lions will sneak one out on Turkey Day.
Well, the Lions have had a history of Thanksgiving Day upsets. They haven't happened too often in recent years, but you've been through the experience. What makes the Thanksgiving Day game special for a Detroit Lion?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a short week one, so you're a little out of sync in the usual routines you have. But what makes it special is that the fans and your family and all of that coming together on national TV. You're the first game of several, and it's just a special day at the stadium for the players, and I really think the fans too. It's just one of those Detroit traditions, and it's an honor to play in that game. And I think all the players feel that way, at least on the Lions side of the ball. I don't know that the visiting team feels so enamored with the.
Short week.
Having to travel and play.
Yeah, exactly right. And for the Lions, they don't get on national TV much. This is their one and only opportunity this year, for example.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you give yourself a chance to showcase and maybe make up for some of the mistakes and blunders that have happened throughout the course of the season.
Absolutely. All right, Ken, thanks for your insights, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week, and hopefully after a Lions upset, I should say.
Well, thanks, Rich, and have a great day.
Yes, and happy Thanksgiving as well. Happy Thanksgiving to Ken Dallafor, and thanks to him for joining us. So we're all up to speed now on the Lions and the Spartans and all the rest of it. We'll shift gears as we continue here. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick. It's MPS in the morning. All right, here's Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick Shields, who vacations this week, and we all get ready for a long weekend, Thanksgiving weekend. Are you a big Black Friday shopper, Amanda? She is. You're going to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning to...
I get up at 2.
All right.
I am in line. I am ready to go. Thursday nights, we have everything all planned out.
Wow.
The ads are out.
See, a couple years ago, I'm a
on.
little naive about this stuff, and a couple years ago there was a certain item, a computer, that I thought would be a nice thing to get for Laura. And it said it was like Best Buy, Circuit City, one of those places.
Well, you got to be there by like midnight.
Well, it said doors open at 5 a.m., so I'm a good guy, and I show up at like 4, and the line was already all the way. You know how big those buildings are. They're warehouses. It was all the way around the building. And
did you see the tents? Have you ever
No.
been there?
No.
Oh, if you get to if the Best Buy ads come out early
Yes.
enough, and you figure out what you want, there are people that will actually camp.
Well,
Thanksgiving evening.
Santa's got his eye on the HD TV for $200 this year. Saw one advertised for like $200. That's not bad for an HD TV.
Right, you just got to get there early.
All right, but you're ready to go at 2 a.m.
Oh, I get up at 2 a.m. We get the coffee started. I
How
don't
about
even
that?
drink coffee, but I do that day.
All right.
And then
I was.
you got the plan.
All right.
Get ready to throw the elbows.
Well,
and
we got plenty to talk about this week. I'm going to be jotting. I want notes from you.
Okay.
And then I'll have my own plan ready to go
I'm
to
an
put into place
expert.
on Friday. That's
All
good to know. All right, excellent, good. I'm at the hockey game one night last week, and in the third period, you know, the camera roams the stands, and they showed a picture of Anthony Michael Hall, who you will remember from the movie The Breakfast Club. He was the kid that brought the flare gun to school because he was going to commit suicide because he was getting a B in shop or some darn thing.
He couldn't make the elephant lamp or
Yeah,
something.
something
wasn't
like
it?
that was it, something like that. But anyways, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, the upside of having a burgeoning film industry in Michigan is now we get celebrities in the stands at Red Wings games. And now we have a note this morning that Bruce Willis is coming to Grand Rapids next week, as a matter of fact, to begin shooting a movie called Setup. And all of this puts us in mind of what's going to happen to the film industry, to the film industry tax credits, for example. Now that we have a new administration coming into power up the street at the state capitol come the 1st of January, and Carrie Jones, the director of the Michigan Film Office, joins us at this hour. Carrie, how optimistic are you about the future of the film industry, and what does the Snyder administration portend for that industry?
Oh, good morning. Well, thanks for having me on. First
Sure,
of all.
absolutely.
You know, and things are going great in Michigan as far as this growing industry. And you know, we do have a new administration coming in. We do have a number of new legislators. Governor-elect Snyder has indicated during the campaign that he didn't want to pull out the rug from under this industry, understanding that a number of Michigan businesses have made investments based on these incentives, and that any changes that he was going to make would be in conjunction with the film industry. So I think that those are all really positive signs.
I was actually involved in the shooting of a commercial couple 3 months ago. It's already aired and whatnot, and I don't need to get into. It was a political ad, and we don't need to get into the what it was all about. But what was fascinating to me was that they shot it at an abandoned factory, an abandoned industrial complex near Pontiac. Had to be 250,000 feet in this facility, and they were transforming this great big empty building, which, absent anything else, would have remained a great big empty building, into a massive film studio, and I just thought the whole thing was quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is. That's Raleigh Studios, and they're going to be they'll be ready to go in early spring, and they're building 9 sound stages, and they've got all kinds of interest for people looking to bring projects to the state. It's a really great thing. I mean, and I think, as you mentioned, it's an empty space that would remain empty, and it's really transitioning old to new.
And I'm talking to a friend of mine.
To the new.
Talking to a friend of mine who was in the radio business, lost his job, and now he's got a catering business, and he's craft services. When people come to town to do a shoot, he's generating jobs and generating income by providing the actors and the crew with food. So there are more jobs here being generated than one might think, just in terms of actors or camera people, sound people, that sort of thing.
Right. I mean, I think that when you look at the list of vendors that these productions use, you'd be astounded. I mean, you have people do T-shirt companies, dry cleaners. My dad, just random story, but my dad's girlfriend was getting a glass door fixed, and he said that he's picked up about 50% of work from. Oh, sorry, there's my dog. From the movie industry. So I mean, it's all. There's all kinds of jobs created, and then you have the people that are supplying. So your friend is in craft services, which is, perhaps one of the most important jobs on the movie set. And you've got all of the local bakeries that are supplying food to them, and you've got the local, farmers. I mean, all of those things, that you don't take into account when you think, film incentive.
All right. Carrie Jones from the Michigan Film Office, the director of the Michigan Film Office. Carrie, thanks for joining us, and let's hope things keep on going on. All right. Thank you very much, Carrie. We're going to take a break. We want to hear what you have to say about the Michigan Film Tax Credit. Good idea? Should we continue it? Bad idea? Should we end it? Just give us a call, 888-900-9966. In for Michael Patrick, I'm Rich, and this is MPS in the Morning. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick on this Monday morning. We would like to get your thoughts on this Michigan film tax credit. Should it be extended? Should the incoming Governor Snyder do anything about it? Some people say, yeah, it's great for Michigan. It's generating jobs. It's creating a whole new industry. It's putting Michigan on the map film-wise. Other people are saying, it's just a giveaway. We're giving so much away in taxes that the state isn't generating any revenue from this effort to develop a film industry in Michigan. The number to call, 888-900-9966. Love to hear from you here. It's 6:51 in the morning. Good news on that is, as we approach 7 o'clock, I draw ever closer to my morning hot chocolate, which is my favorite part of the day. The Daily Leader, by the way, this morning is brought to you by Northwood University, celebrating 50 years of producing leaders. We've got some football leaders who will be taking center stage at Ford Field this weekend. We have arrived at the point in the high school football playoffs where it's going to be championship weekend on Friday and Saturday at Ford Field. Let's take a look at how we arrived at this point. The semifinals were conducted this weekend past. There's so much football going on. I was at the Michigan State game watching MSU Purdue, while on my computer I was watching Wisconsin-Michigan, so to speak, simultaneously. And then I went home. I love ESPN3 because I was able to go home and I watched the Iowa-Ohio State game. I wound up watching USC at Oregon State, and finally I fell asleep, and that was enough football for one day. All right, in Division I, the final is Plymouth, which is a big surprise. Even though they're 11-2, they upset the number one team in Division I, Canton, 2 weeks ago, and then they won their semifinal. I think another upset. They beat a powerful Rockford team. The Rockford Rams are always they were what you call a perennial power. Plymouth knocked them off 20-17 to make the title game. They will play Lake Orion, which defeated Detroit Cass Tech 24-21. Lake Orion, another one of those Division I powerhouses. Now, I saw them earlier this year, and Harrison handled them pretty good, knocked them off. As a matter of fact, as Harrison continued on what has been to this point an undefeated season. So that should be an interesting matchup, Plymouth and Lake Orion. Speaking of Farmington Harrison, they wiped out Grosse Pointe South 51-0. Grosse Pointe South was one of the great stories of the playoffs this year. They are one of the few teams to get in with 5 wins. Typically, you need 6 wins to qualify for the football playoffs. They finished at 5-4, snuck into the playoffs, and then it was upset after upset after upset. They defeated in the quarterfinals an undefeated Temperance Bedford team, which had beaten everybody this year. Ann Arbor Huron, Ann Arbor Pioneer, Airport Carleton, you name it. Temperance Bedford beat them. But in a game played in the fog, it was Grosse Pointe South beating Temperance 44-42 on a field goal with 4 seconds to go, which, according to somebody who was at the game and told me about it, you could not see from the stands. That's how foggy it was. But their Cinderella run ended when Farmington Hills Harrison knocked them off 51-50. That means John Harrington is going for a state record 13th state title on Friday, and the team they're going to play, Lowell, no stranger to the championship game themselves. Lowell, always a great football team. They beat Walled Lake Central 35-21, so it's Harrison and Lowell in the title game at Ford Field in Division II on Friday. Over in Division III, East Grand Rapids over Mount Pleasant 31-16. Orchard Lake St. Mary's, meanwhile, knocked off DeWitt 41-20. Sorry, DeWitt. Championship game, therefore, East GR 13-0, taking on Orchard Lake St. Mary's 11-2. I'd say East Grand Rapids the favorite in that one, but those Catholic League teams are always tough, so you certainly can't count Orchard Lake St. Mary's out in that Division III championship game. Down to Division IV, the title game, Grand Rapids Catholic Central taking on Williamston. Catholic Central 11-2. Williamston is 12-1. Williamston beat Crockett 33-13 in their semifinal. Catholic Central all over Edwardsburg, 46-31 to advance in Division IV. In Division V, the championship game is going to be Grand Rapids West Catholic. They're 12-1, and they'll take on an 11-2 Olivet team. West Catholic beat the Menominee 24-20 in the semis. Olivet over Millington 21-14. On to Division VI. Ithaca beat Iron Mountain 27-13 to advance. Monroe St. Mary Catholic Central over Constantine 22-14. Those two teams meet in the championship game on Friday. Some of these championship games are Friday, and some of them are contested on Saturday. It's a two-day event down there at Ford Field. Division 7, Ishpeming over Ravenna, 22-20 in the semis. Hudson beat Warren Michigan Collegiate 52-6. So it's Ishpeming, you can't say it enough, taking on Hudson, two undefeated teams in the Division 7 championship game. And in Division 8, Mount Pleasant Sacred Heart beat Crystal Falls Forest Park 27-16 in the semifinals. Saugatuck over Fulton in overtime 20-14. Sacred Heart and Saugatuck for the Class 8 championship. Though that's the first of the playoff games, as a matter of fact, Friday morning at 10 o'clock. You go down to Ford Field, you'll see 4 games Friday, 4 games Saturday for one low price. It's a great show. We look forward to it. Rich Kincaid filling in for Michael Patrick Shields here on this Monday morning. We're going to take a break and come back with more for you, well, after the break. Clip of a speech from President John F. Kennedy, tragically assassinated 47 years ago today in Dallas, Texas. But a quote, a comment from that speech which rings true even today as we see events transpiring in Washington, D.C. It's the lame duck session of Congress. The question is Congress going to do anything in this lame duck session? The Republicans are saying that essentially what Congress does now is illegitimate because they're taking over in January. But I'll tell you, people on the Democratic side are saying, wait a minute, you don't take over until January. So anything this Congress does in its remaining month and a week before the new Congress is sworn in is, of course, legitimate under terms of our Constitution. And to discuss all of this with us is Congressman Mark Schauer. Congressman, thanks for joining us this morning. And I just want to jump right in and talk about this vote last week in Congress to extend unemployment benefits to, I believe it's going to turn out to be about 2 million Americans. The vote on a procedural matter needed a two-thirds majority to pass. It fell 17 votes shy of that two-thirds majority. The thing that got to me was that 11 members of your party, 11 Democrats, have voted against it. 7 other Democrats didn't bother to vote. If you'd gotten those 18 votes, the measure would have passed.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate, but a lot of Republicans voted for it. It came up short, and this is an issue that can't wait until January 3rd. That is my last day in office. In Michigan, 180,000 individuals will exhaust their unemployment benefits a week from today, November 29th. So the Congress must act, in my opinion. I mean, I've always looked at the issue of unemployment benefits in two ways. One, from just a pure economic standpoint. By these families losing, exhausting their unemployment benefits, they will not have the ability to put money into our economy for groceries, for gas, for clothing for their kids, things to just support their families in a very basic way. That money does stimulate the economy. But
and
the
flip
other is from a moral standpoint. So, at Thanksgiving time, at Christmas time, do we want these families to, fall from living on the margin into, outright poverty? Shame on those Democrats that didn't vote for it. But, it was the Republican Party that had a chance to make sure this passed. They had a chance to make a statement that, they are a compassionate party. So, I look forward to, returning next Monday, November 29th to Washington and having another vote on this and giving the Republican Party as well as those Democrats a chance to vote for this again.
The flip side of the argument,
it's the right thing to do, and economically it's the right thing to do.
I agree. The flip side of the argument, though, is that you are rewarding people for not looking for a job. But I can tell you personally, the amount of money that you get on unemployment is not exactly an incentive to stay out of work. It just barely.
The maximum is $362 a week,
right?
And that hasn't been raised since when I was in the state legislature. And it is not an incentive to sit home. And I'll tell you from my own family experience, my son-in-law was a journeyman electrician trained to the highest level as an electrician, went about a year, couldn't find a job. He was in Ypsilanti. It was a tough economy then. He finally had to move to the Upper Peninsula to find a job, and thank God they're working. We have a 20-month-old grandson.
Mm-hmm.
This is the story of what's been going on. Fortunately, the economy is slowly recovering. In Michigan, we're seeing, the auto industry coming back, but there's a ways to go. That is something that, this issue of extending unemployment benefits during the time where our economy is slowly recovering is something that should happen. Democrats and Republicans should have a chance to make a statement about whose side they're on.
What was the rationale for using a procedure which resulted in a two-thirds majority being required for passage?
Well, it was the quickest way to bring the issue up for a vote. And oftentimes that suspension procedure is attempted. It's oftentimes used when a bill is not controversial. I guess in this case, we found out that there wasn't quite the two-thirds there. I think the question will be whether some of the Republicans that voted against it, as well as some of the Democrats, will be prepared to vote for it under suspension. If not, what's called regular order will have to be used. But one way or another, this has to be passed. And, this is, I reject the notion that, everything must now wait until January 4th or January 3rd when the new Congress begins. This has to happen. There is an important nuclear treaty, the START treaty with Russia, that should happen. There are international implications if that isn't approved by the Senate. There are tax issues, the so-called Bush tax cuts that have to be decided. Otherwise, everyone's income tax rate goes up starting January 1. So there are a lot of things that have to be resolved before the end of the year.
With this unemployment issue, though, if you don't use the special rules, if you do need a two-thirds majority, maybe it doesn't pass. If you decide to have full debate on this question, is it a case where the Republicans can run out the clock and you don't get a vote on this before January 3rd?
Well, they can attempt to offer up a number of amendments, which I'm fine with that approach. What they I don't know how they will try to amend it and what they will try to attach to it. That is true when. Under the suspension, it can run as a straight up or down vote, but regular order is fine with me. One way or another, families that are without work in a tough economy at the holiday time deserve to have this lifeline extended to them. That's why it's a no-brainer for me, and one way or another, it has to come up for a vote again immediately.
There was talk maybe 10 days or so ago that the Obama administration was going to cave in on the tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans and perhaps let those stay in effect for a year or two. Then late last week, word began to come out that the Democrats are going to put up a fight on this and hold a vote to extend tax cuts for everyone making under $250,000. How's that going to play out? Are the Democrats going to put up a fight or roll over?
This is one where there's got to be, a majority in the House, as well as, a supermajority of 60 in the Senate, and then it's got to get to the president's desk. I think my read is the president would support a straight extension of the tax cuts for middle-class wage earners. He would probably support a compromise. There's one I've heard in the Senate where these quote-unquote tax cuts are extended to people who earn up to $1 million a year. I don't think there's a chance that all of these tax cuts could be made permanent, including for people who are millionaires. So I think there's a compromise that can be found. I said during my campaign I didn't feel that this was a time to raise taxes on anyone. That's not good for our economy. So I'm sort of in the camp where let's find a middle ground. So I think this is one where Republicans and Democrats have to sit together and find a middle ground that's best for our economy.
Congressman, we've got 30 seconds to go here. Republicans say if you keep the tax cuts in place, it will generate jobs. I'm looking at these tax cuts having been in effect now for 8 years, and they haven't generated any jobs. How do you make that case?
Well, I think your analysis is, I think there's value to your analysis. There's also the concern about impact on the national debt, the federal budget deficit.
Sure.
So, tax cuts on the highest wage earners, I'm open to extending them for a period of time, maybe a year, but certainly not be made permanent. That would be very detrimental to the budget deficit.
Congressman, thanks for your thoughts. Good luck in Washington. Nice chatting with you. You bet. Okay, Congressman Mark Schauer joining us here on this Monday morning. Rich Kincaid pinch hitting this week for Michael Patrick Shields. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more. This is MPS in the Morning. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick on this morning. In fact, I'll be in for Michael Patrick all week long. I'm pretty excited about that. I think if I listen to It's the Law long enough with Royal Oaks, I will be able to pass the Michigan bar. So, I'm just thinking, if we stick with this thing. That was my original plan, actually. When I went to Michigan State, I was a political science major, and I thought I would wind up a lawyer. But what happened was I had a great work-study job at WKAR, the NPR affiliate, right there on campus. Mm-hmm. And one day when I was a sophomore, they asked me to fill in on the sportscast because the regular sportscaster, Bob Kurtz, had to leave with the football team for a road game. So there I am, 18 years old, shaking in my boots, doing the sports, and I loved it, and I wound up in radio. And Bob Kurtz, actually, I saw him last Friday night at Joe Louis Arena because he's the play-by-play guy for the Minnesota Wild. Small world sort of thing. But for those of you who remember Bob Kurtz, he's doing great, and he's still the same nice guy that he was here. Jerry from Lansing had some comments, but I'm not sure he's still with us.
Nope, he's not with us anymore.
Okay, he had some comments about what Congressman Schauer was saying, what I was saying, and I was ready to engage, boy, but Jerry didn't hang on. So let's go to Greg Stebbin, who is with Men's Health Magazine, and I'll tell you what, it's that kind of week here where it can be tough on some guys. You've got holiday traveling coming up. You've got family dynamics at play, especially if it's a long car ride to the relatives. And then there are other issues that always come up whenever you're hanging out with other members of the family. And Greg's going to help us make all of that a little bit easier. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning.
Where are you traveling this Thanksgiving?
I'm actually in New York City, and my wife has already left to go visit her family in South Carolina, and I will follow on Wednesday evening. The busiest travel day of the year.
Exactly right, which is one of the reasons that it's so stressful. Just the mere act of boarding a plane. It takes longer on Thanksgiving, takes longer on this holiday weekend than it does at any other time of the year.
Yeah, I think part of that is you might think that Christmas is busier, but actually I think people have more time off around the Christmas holiday. So our travel plans to get with our friends and family takes place over more days. But with Thanksgiving, most of us, frankly, get out of work sometime on Wednesday, or maybe we take Wednesday off, but we're all trying to get home on that same day. And even under the best of circumstances, I can speak from experience and say it's pretty crazy. This year it's going to be even crazier because, as people have been hearing, there's some new rules from the TSA about how you're going to go through security.
What are the main stressors at this time of year for men?
Well, I think what we're talking about here really applies to both men and women. One of the things we've done in the current issue of Men's Health is we've really looked at, once you get on the plane, are there things you can do to make the actual flying part of your trip more pleasant? And the answer is yes, whether you're traveling alone or with a spouse or a girlfriend or with a whole family. There are certain things you can do to make your flight more pleasant. One is knowing the right seats to buy. For instance, now airlines not only make you pay for your ticket for the plane, but now they make you pay for the seat. And that can get very expensive, especially for a family. And in some ways, when you pay for a special seat, there's nothing special about it other than the fact that you got to pay more for it.
Well, the only seats that I can think of that are special are the seats in the exit row. You get slightly more leg room there, so I'm always willing to make that trade-off in exchange for having to lift that 40-pound door should the situation arise. What do they mean by special seats?
Well, there's actually a collection of seats on most planes that have extra leg room, like the exit row seats.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the bulkhead seats. Excuse me, the bulkhead seats are... Excuse me.
You do get a little more room with that bulkhead seat.
Seats are the seats where you're often right behind the galley.
Yeah.
So
the downside to that, you get a little more leg room, but the downside
with the flight attendants.
Yeah, the downside to that though is you're staring at a wall for the whole flight.
You are, although you have more leg room while you stare at the wall. There's actually a downside to taking those seats, or a potential downside, and that is particularly if you're childless. You may find that you end up sitting next to a mom or a dad and an infant, because often that's the best place on a plane for parents with a child in a baby seat to strap the child in.
Mm-hmm.
So those particular seats, you'll pay a premium for them, and on top of that, you may be next to a baby who's crying on the whole trip. Some people who are single are less receptive to that than others. Also on airlines now, you may pay more for an aisle seat or a window seat. There are tricks for getting around that, by the way. For instance, if you're a couple and you're flying, take two seats together so you're not paying for the center seat, and there's a good chance no one will take the third seat because everybody wants to take a shot at sitting alone and not having someone between them.
Mm-hmm.
So taking the middle seat is often a good strategy for saving money.
Oh, well, there you go. That is the dread middle seat, especially if it's a flight of 3 or 4 hours. If you're heading out to the coast or something, it'd just be a nightmare.
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of this really is a chess game. There's no guarantees here. You know, some people might listen to what I just said and say, well, actually, the better strategy is to take the window and the aisle, and then you figure nobody's going to volunteer for the center seat between you and your significant other. That's also a valid strategy. It's just that today on airlines, it costs more to take that strategy because today you pay more for the window and the aisle. I think for a lot of people, it's kind of weighing budget against comfort. And you kind of have to decide for yourself how much is my comfort really worth.
And you also,
obviously, on a longer flight, it's probably worth more.
Yeah, and you also have to consider at this, especially this weekend, those flights are going to be full. Somebody's going to sit in that middle seat.
Well, that's probably true. Although, you know, I travel a lot. I'm always willing to bet on a little extra comfort, and I'm always trying to give myself the edge.
Well, there you go. I'll tell you, the best guy I ever traveled with was Paul Woods, the color commentator for the Detroit Red Wings. And his whole deal, and it was a lot less strict back in these days. Flights weren't as full. He would make a beeline for the last row of the airplane, which was right next to the galley. He would then engage in small talk with the stewardess, and I can guarantee you, as soon as it was wheels up, there was a beverage in front of Paul Woods. Not a bad plan.
There really is something to be said for, you know, as you're choosing your seat online, people tend to look towards the front of the plane. So there is something to be said about taking the last seats on the plane. Now, the downside of that is sometimes they don't recline. So, again,
right.
You're making a trade-off there. And actually, some experts say the best place to sit on a plane is actually in the middle of any section because it gets you away from the bulkhead, it gets you away from the exit row, and it gets you away from another thing that can be very annoying or distracting, which is chatting flight attendants and the sound of them mixing drinks and rolling carts in and out.
Sure.
Things like that.
I will say this for the Paul Woods approach, though. He was unfailingly polite to the stewardesses and flight attendants, of course, now. And I find that in so many walks of life, just a little bit of kindness with someone who is there to provide you with service will wind up getting you much better service.
I think that is really, I think that's a truism for no matter where you go. I think it's really applies when you're flying. You know, as frankly awful as flying may be for us as passengers, you can just imagine what it's like for the flight attendants who have to deal with grumpy people like us all day. And, you know, we saw with the guy from, I think, JetBlue who took the slide out of the plane. You know, it's these are people who live in a world of stress and have to deal with hundreds of sometimes unpleasant people.
Right, and
Just being a little bit pleasant can make a huge difference.
And I've flown at holiday times where some of those people that get on the airplane are already, I think, maybe over the legal limit before they even step on the airplane, and that can cause some problems too. I've seen that happen.
Yeah, I think it's. I am sympathetic to flight attendants.
Yeah.
Frankly, I'm sympathetic to me and my fellow passengers. I mean, we can be a handful to deal with, and I think we've all had the experience of sitting next to somebody who's unpleasant, who's had too much to drink, who's ill-behaved. And imagine if you had to deal with that as your job versus getting up and walking away. Flight attendants have those kinds of people getting on every flight that they take care of.
Is it a problem when you on the return flight, because then you're probably a little worn out from the whole holiday experience? It might be even worse.
Well, you're absolutely right there. There are some things, as we point out in this article, again, that you can do to increase your odds of having a little more comfortable flight. There's a little bit of me that kind of hates to talk about these things publicly, because the more people who know about these little secrets, the less opportunity there is for me, selfishly. But, for instance, if you really want to be at your highest level of comfort on a flight, one of the things to do is, keep checking the website of your airline. If you're not happy with the seats that you and your family have, those seat assignments can change. So even up to 24 hours before you leave, keep checking to see if there's better seats. And if you're really happy with the seat you have, you should keep checking the website too, because sometimes an airline will change planes, and that will cause you to lose that great seat that you had, and you need to go back and reclaim it. And even as you're walking up to the gate or the check-in at the airport, it's still not too late to get a better seat than what you have. It may cost you, but it's always worth asking. You should never dismiss the possibility that a family or someone has canceled their flight at the last minute.
Greg, we're out of time. Thanks very much for the tips, and happy Thanksgiving. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick Shields. It's MPS in the morning. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick this Thanksgiving week, and we are excited right now to be joined by U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow, herself a resident, someone who grew up right here in mid-Michigan and has gone on to achieve great things, the latest of which is her appointment, her election as chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry during the upcoming 112th Congress. And a prime challenge for you, Senator, will be writing the next farm bill. That's going to be a momentous and historic piece of legislation, one supposes.
Well, good morning. It really is. The Farm Bill is really a jobs bill. And in Michigan, 1 out of 4 people work in agriculture or agribusiness in some way, or the food business. So it's important to us. We haven't had anybody chairing the committee in 120 years, so it's been a long time. And I grew up in a small town in Clare and have spent all of my career involved in some way in agriculture policy. So I'm looking forward to the next step. And this particular committee covers a very broad reach for us in Michigan. It's, of course, our traditional growers, supporting our farmers, large and small. It's also rural development, which for our rural communities is the way they finance water and sewer projects, jobs projects, the way they get funding for police cars and fire engines, and it's very, very important. But it's also important for our urban communities now, not only with the nutrition programs, but what we're doing with energy and biofuels, and also in urban areas now developing jobs related to farmers markets, community gardens. So it's very broad reach. And the other thing that most folks don't realize is that the largest investment we make as a country in conservation, in land and water conservation, is through the Farm Bill. And that's, of course, a very big deal for us as well.
Senator Stabenow, it's a huge question, but what's your number one priority as you write the new bill?
Well, I would have to say it's tough to pick one thing. I think it's very important that we keep the right balance, having a farm safety net so that we're supporting agriculture and production in this country, because it's really about food security and national security for us here. So it's important that we be supporting traditional agriculture. But I'm also very interested in expanding other ways of creating jobs through the Farm Bill. And so that relates to energy. I mean, what we do now with agricultural crops, with energy crops, to be able to create those E85 ethanol vehicles or other biofuels that or biomass energy, the folks up north that are involved with the timber industry and forestry industry are creating jobs using energy through the agricultural products. So I always look at everything through jobs, and so that's always number one for me. And that's really what this bill is. It's a jobs bill.
Senator, congratulations on taking over the chairmanship. Best of luck with it. We know it's important stuff, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, it's good to talk to you, and we'll keep in touch on this as well.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
Thanks.
Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan. I used to cover, I almost slipped and said congressman when we were in the midst of the interview. I remember when Debbie Stabenow, back when I was beginning my career as a news person right here in Lansing, was a member of the Ingham County Board of Commissioners. And I mean, just a member, and then later she became chairman of the Board of Commissioners, and she has moved right on up through the ranks all the way to U.S. Senator. So I always think about that whenever I have the opportunity to talk to Senator Stabenow, that, hey, this lady used to go down to Mason, to the county seat, and cover the Ingham County Board of Commissioners meetings, and she would be there, all right? This is the anniversary, as we've talked about a little bit on the program this morning, the 47th anniversary of the death of President John F. Kennedy, assassinated in Dallas, Texas. A unique perspective on that weekend. Kathy is on the other end of our line right now. And Kathy, you were at President Kennedy's funeral?
Yes, indeed. And I had a 6-month-old baby that I had to leave with a babysitter, which I had never, ever done before. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to be part of history. I lived in Alexandria, and I had to take a bus in order to go to the cemetery. And there was this barricade, of course, where you could only go so far. But anybody that has lived through this wants to remember what a dynamic personality he was. And then, you know, there was little John doing his little salute and everything. And I was there. And I'll tell you, when those guns went off, it just resonated in your bones. Mm-hmm. And we can never, ever forget history. See, I think that's one of the problems with today, is that we don't have enough recollection of history.
All right. Well, it's quite a memory that you have there, Kathy, who was at President Kennedy's funeral, this being the anniversary of President Kennedy's death, a very sad day in American history. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick Shields, and we've got some more sad news to break after the break, so we'll be back with that right after this. And on behalf of Michael Patrick, we say good morning to all of you. Rich Kincaid filling in for Michael Patrick this week while he enjoys Hawaii, which should be a pretty good place to spend Thanksgiving. I'll be with you all week long, leading us up to Thanksgiving and the big Thanksgiving Day game. Well, I guess hard to say really it's a big Thanksgiving Day game when the team, the Lions, are 2-8 heading into it, but always a good time for the for the Thanksgiving Day Classic at Ford Field. I'll tell you what, this is a bit of news yesterday. Hit me like a thunderbolt. I was actually on the air when I received word yesterday. I was doing a talk show down in Detroit when I received word that Rob Lytle, one of the greatest running backs in Michigan history, died suddenly, passed away yesterday of a heart attack. He was 56 years old. Rob Lytle was the Big Ten's most valuable player in 1976, placed third in the Heisman Trophy balloting behind Pitt's Tony Dorsett. He was Dorsett when he played for Pitt. He was Dorsett when he became a Dallas Cowboy. And California's Ricky Bell finished second in the Heisman race. Lytle third back in 1976. Lytle, a member of 3 Big Ten championship teams. He ran for 3,317 yards and 26 touchdowns in his Michigan career. He remains the 7th leading rusher in Michigan history. And in my mind's eye, I can see Rob Lytle carrying the football for Michigan. You know, I'm not a Michigan fan. I'm a Michigan State guy, but I respect Michigan, and I respected Rob Lytle and his accomplishments. He was one of the great ones, and he passed away at 56 years of age. Greg Johnson of the Grand Rapids Press and M Live joining us right now to talk a little bit of football. I'll tell you what, it just hit me so hard yesterday, Greg.
Oh, that was really surprising news. I mean, that's just, you don't expect that, especially when you know, he kind of stays embedded in your mind when you've seen those players over the years as, you know, young and healthy and
right.
Playing in a Super Bowl. I remember him playing in the Super Bowl here.
Yeah.
You know, it's just kind of stunning.
Yeah, and he was not what you would call a finesse back. He ran over guys.
Oh yeah, he was a straight line player is what he was. He was kind of the old school, hand it to him and let him go, and he wasn't all that big, but he was strong. He was tough, and you know, he was kind of one of, you know, a Bo Schembechler kind of player too.
Well, I saw a program on the Big Ten Network not long ago. The top Big Ten running backs of the 1970s. Archie Griffith of Ohio State was number 1. You'd figure. I mean, he wins 2 Heisman trophies and whatnot. And he was great. But Rob Lytle was rated number 4 in that poll of the 10 best running backs of the 1970s. And the 70s produced so many great running backs, and that certainly said a lot about Rob Lytle.
Oh yeah, that was the 3 yards in a cloud of dust era. And,
yeah,
and Lytle and Archie Griffin were the ones who made it like 20 yards. And oops, I never saw that guy.
Yep. Well, let's turn our attention to Michigan State on Saturday. I was highly entertained by that football game, Michigan State's victory over Purdue. I thought for 3.5 quarters, though, Michigan State was doing everything they possibly could do, everything that a team, in fact, does do when they are about to be upset by an inferior opponent. They gave up Purdue's longest play of the season, an 80-yard run. They gave up Purdue's second longest pass play of the season, a 67-yarder, when they had Purdue buried at their own 2-yard line. They gave up Purdue's longest field goal of the season. Dan Conroy missed his first extra point after hitting 37 in a row. It really looked like everything was in place for Purdue to upset Michigan State, and then Purdue handed the ball game right to the Spartans, and, well, thank goodness they did as far as Spartan fans are concerned.
Yeah, there's no doubt the turnovers were huge, and you know, and obviously Michigan State saw an opportunity, and then they started playing. So it's not something you'd want to recommend, and they were lucky they were playing somebody they could come back, you know, on, and but they made the plays too. You know, the fourth quarter was like it was a different team. All of a sudden, a different switch went on because all of a sudden the defense could stop them, and all of a sudden the offense could make plays.
I think that was the thing that surprised me the most. Purdue in the 4 games prior to the game at Michigan State on Saturday had lost all 4 and had been outscored in those games 154-39, and boom, here you see them all of a sudden putting together a 17-play, 88-yard drive against the Spartans. I never expected to see that.
No, I didn't either, but they do have some pretty good athletes, and they made plays. But, you know, it's those guys are on scholarship, too. I think that it just kind of shows the difference between a really good team and a really bad team isn't that big. You know, it's
right.
Whether you do it that day, it's whether you're ready to play that day. It's the breaks sometimes too. It's college football is a strange animal. I think that's why we like it. You know, who expected that game to be so much fun? I think people had more fun watching that game than they did most of the other ones.
Yeah, it could be. As I said, I enjoyed it myself immensely. Well, what a final weekend we've got. A 3-way tie for first place. So Wisconsin, they're ranked highest in the BCS standings of the Big Ten teams at number 7. Ohio State number 8 in the BCS. Michigan State at number 10. They're all 3 tied for the conference lead, and I guess by this time next week we'll know who's going to pass it in. Greg, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, take care.
All right, Greg Johnson of the Grand Rapids Press and M Live. I could have talked to him, longer than we did, but hey, the clock, this is like football. It's a timed game, and we're out of time. All right, Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick. We will continue on MPS in the Morning in just a moment.